Hi, everybody. This is Terry Kerr, Executive Coach and Empowerment Strategist with the Unstuck Duck Coaching. Welcome. Here I showcase stories of extraordinary survivors who have made the conscious choice to pivot and thrive. So today I have with me my friend Ame-Lia Tamburrini from Victoria, BC. Not originally, but imported.
Thanks for having me.
Women Network, and in getting to know each other, found we had some similar stories. So I'm super excited to have you here with me today.
Thank you so much. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, Terry. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, it's going to be great. So I have a bunch of different questions, but feel free to go on them or off them. Just tell us your story. We want to get to know you a little bit. Okay. So let's start with, tell me a little bit about yourself, your family, where you grew up, a little bit more about you.
Great. Well, like you said, I'm imported to Victoria, but I grew up in Ontario. I was actually born in Windsor, Ontario, to my dad, who was an Italian immigrant. He immigrated to Canada when he was 18. And my mom, who grew up in Southern Ontario in a Mennonite community. My parents actually split up when I was 5 years old. And at that point, my mom, my brother, and we had a Scottish nanny at the time. We all moved to Wasaga Beach and lived with my grandmother for quite a long time. And that's really where I grew up, Wasaga Beach. That's where I went to elementary school and high school. And after that, went off to university at Waterloo, did my undergrad there in kinesiology. And from that point, I've been sort of traveling all over, living in various different places across Canada and in the US, and found my way here to Victoria about 5 years ago.
Nice. And you haven't left?
I have not left. I don't want to leave. I love this place. It's definitely home.
Yeah, I moved here to go to university, assuming that it would be just very short-lived, and ended up meeting a guy and buying a house. That was 30 years ago.
It happens.
Yeah, totally. So you have a degree in kinesiology, but I also know that you I remember hearing you say something about epidemiology.
Yes, when I was living in Calgary, I did my master's in epidemiology.
What is epidemiology?
It's the study of disease transmission in populations and what determines disease. So a very popular topic right now in the world of COVID-19.
Yeah. I find that's really kind of super interesting. I would love to pick your brain a little farther on that, but this is not where we're going to do that. So we bonded because you are a cancer survivor. I'm a cancer survivor. And so tell me a little bit about your cancer story.
Well, my cancer story starts well before I had cancer. It was around 2018. And at that point in my life, I had been making some pretty significant changes leading up to that point. So about 4 years prior to that, I was living in the States. I had just gone through a relationship breakup. And I had this moment of realizing I wanted to live my life differently. And so that next 4 years coming into 2018, I had moved to Victoria. I was working with life coaches. I was working with spiritual teachers. I was really getting comfortable meditating. And I was making some changes in my life, and yet I was still very unhappy. And I was actually really depressed at that point in my life. And so I sort of had one of those come to Jesus moments where I sat on my meditation pillow and I was like, okay, universe, help me out here. I really want to have joy in my life and I'm not experiencing that. So what do I need to do? And then right after that, it's like my whole life fell apart, which I thought was really interesting. So I realized in that moment that I was in a job that was totally sucking the life out of me. And so I gave my notice, but I was terrified because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I had made a move, but I was still very stuck in that place. I was dating that year and I hadn't dated in a really long time, and that relationship had just crumbled, and that left me super heartbroken. I had gone on a trip with my mom that fall and realized that her health was deteriorating. And that just left me super scared and very sad. And then all of that, like this was a 6-month period, it ended in this massage therapy appointment where I was using up all the healthcare benefits from the job that I was leaving. And she found a lump on my neck. And I was in such a state of despair in this point in my life. I just did not understand what was happening to me in my life. And so that was really hard. And so that lump, it did turn into cancer. It took about a month and a half to get a final diagnosis, which was stage 3 Hodgkin's lymphoma. So I had cancer in my neck and in my chest and in my groin. And the decision at that point was to do chemotherapy. That was the standard practice for Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so that's what I did. And that ended in August of last year. So it was 6 months of chemo.
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot in there I'd like to poke, but it's okay. I'll be gentle. I really love, I don't love that you had to go through that, but I love how the universe does this. That when you're like, oh my gosh, like what is it that I need to learn in this moment? And I also had decided just before I got sick that I was going to move to Saskatchewan. We were, it doesn't sound like, to some, so I love it out there. And my sons wanted to go to school out there. And I just really wanted to get away. And I wanted to slow life down a little bit. And we were considering it our great adventure, and we'd made the decision and we'd announced it at Christmas that this was what we were going to do. And we were going to wait until the end of the school year and then move out there before the next school year. So we had some time. I hadn't quit my job or anything. Thank God. And I was also using up all my benefits at that time. I was like, okay, I'm going to get my eyes checked, get my glasses fixed. I'm going to get my teeth done, all the things that I, wanted to do, and ended up in a mobile mammogram clinic, which would have been covered anyway, but it was part of the mindset of where I was. And it was like, hey, I've never had a mammogram before. Let's check that out. So that's how I found out that I had breast cancer.
Oh.
So Hodgkin's lymphoma, I'm not super familiar with it. So you had chemo. What was your regimen like?
It was once every 2 weeks for 6 months.
Okay, so that's a lot.
It was a lot. Yeah. And with chemo, it's cumulative. So, at first there were lots of adjustments to make. My body was reacting in all sorts of ways to the chemotherapy. But yeah, it got heavier and harder as time went on.
Yeah. And now?
I feel much, much, much better. I feel like in terms of energy and brain fog level, which is sort of how I measure my wellness these days, I am at 90%, which feels really, really good. When I hit the 3 months post-treatment session, I didn't have much hope at all for getting to where I am today. I just felt exhausted on all levels, and I had an expectation that I would recover quicker than that. And my oncologist, she was fabulous this whole time, but she told me at that point that it could take 1 to 2 years to actually get back up to any sort of normal, whatever that means. And so that sort of allowed me to just relax a little bit and give myself permission to go slower, take the expectation away. And that helped. And I also do just naturally feel a lot better. So, yeah.
So they don't do surgery with lymphoma. It's strictly chemo, right?
Strictly chemo. Yeah. I did have a lymph node removed just for diagnosis. But yeah, that's it. And then sometimes they'll follow up with radiation if it's still there after the chemo, but I did not have that. So I'm grateful for that.
Nice. So did they give you the all clear then?
Yep, I'm all clear.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. That's a good feeling.
It is a good feeling.
Yeah. But it also comes along with that, why did I have to go through that?
Yes.
So at what point, so you had mentioned that you actually already answered this question pretty much, but I want to kind of dive in a bit further. So at what point did you realize that you no longer wanted to do what you were doing before you got sick? So you had said that you'd gone through this stuff with family, that you were super miserable, and you'd quit your job. What job was that?
I was working at the Ministry of Health for the provincial government.
Okay. And what was it that was really weighing you with it by being there?
That I was not giving the gifts that I knew I had inside me to give. And I felt so far removed from community. And that's where that's where my heart is in community. And so I think I was just out of alignment.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So how did you feel when you were, okay, so you've quit your job, which had all the benefits and all that kind of stuff. Did you actually quit, or did you just take some time off?
No, I quit. I gave my notice. It was a long period. I gave them like 4 months, and then, but yeah, December 28th was my last day.
Okay. And you started treatment?
I started treatment on March 12th. So I got my diagnosis in February.
Okay.
Yeah. I will say, yeah, I was making those pivots beforehand. Like I had made that decision to quit my job, but it was sort of like I made a superficial pivot because inside I was terrified, like I said, to start my own business. So terrified to the extent that when this lump was looking like it was going to be cancer, I actually had a moment of relief where I was like, oh, well, if I die, I won't have to start my business.
Okay.
So I had kind of pivoted, but not really. And I think for me, the moment of pivot actually happened like pretty early on in the cancer journey. So it was middle of February. I spent a week in hospital just waiting to get this lymph node removed so they could further diagnose a Hodgkin's lymphoma. And that was probably one of the worst periods in the whole journey because there's just so much uncertainty. You know, that beginning stage, you don't know anything.
Yeah.
And so I guess prior to that, 5 years earlier, my dad had died of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And between diagnosis and death was 2 months. And at that point, I didn't know the difference between Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I hadn't done any research. And so in my head, I'm sitting there in this hospital waiting for this surgery to happen. I had no date. And in my mind, every day was like one more day off that 2 month period that I had left to live. And I was in quite a state. And so one day my internal medicine doctor came in and it just all bubbled out of me. I was trying to really keep myself composed through this whole process. Like, I got this. But internally I didn't. And he was amazing. He pulled up a chair, he sat beside me, and he told me two really important things. He said, AmeLia, one, nobody expects you to be fully composed throughout this journey. So he just gave me permission in that moment to just be. And then second, he said, your journey is not your dad's. You are two separate individuals and you're on two very different journeys. And this is going to be an event in your life that you're going to look back on. And for me, that was the moment. It was like the clouds parted and I just saw this then. This is when it really became an opportunity for me to make the pivot. And I got up the next day. I canceled all my visitations for people. I was like, I just need a day by myself in this hospital bed. And I pulled up my journal and I decided to rewrite the story of what this was going to be. And I want to read it to you because I just love this. It says, this is the story of a gal who was living an amazing life, who wanted to elevate her life to an even more amazing place. So she went on a journey, a short journey, through some treatments that were not always pleasant, but that were not so bad. On this journey, she met and connected with the most amazing people who helped her to find joy and tap into her deeper purpose for being here. The journey helped her see all the places she was still showing up in fear in her life, those touch spots that are still holding her back from living full-heartedly. She emerges from this process more sure of herself, more loving, better able to process grief and anger, and with more grit, the no bullshit kind that simply allows her to let go of the crap that doesn't serve her so she can move forward with grace. So to me, that was the moment where I was like, I'm shedding. This opportunity is going to be that chance that I have to shed all of it and step fully into living full-heartedly.
That's beautiful. And so it's amazing to me. I mean, I know you relatively well, and it just fits so well. Your words, just, prophetic. It was just awesome. Nice work. So tell me a bit about your business and what you're doing now.
So my business, it really was one of the areas where I pivoted in. So I had started it in January, and at that point it was really about public engagement. So trying to bring community voice into decision-making processes. I had lots of experience in that, and I thought that's what I was going to do. But cancer, really helped me get solid in terms of what my gifts were in particular and how I wanted to give those. So Consulting is all about creating the space for people to find and express their voice and deeply connect with those around them. And so I use circle dialogue to facilitate conversations where we decrease divisiveness in the room and increase connection. And I do all sorts of things with that, workshops and transformational programs, and also thought-provoking talks to just get people thinking a bit differently about how they're communicating and whether they're communicating consciously or unconsciously in any given moment.
Wow. That's so important for today, for these days. Do you ever just feel like you're exceptionally relevant in all parts of your of what you do and everything that comes up? I mean, I have those moments where I feel completely like I'm just in the right spot at the right time, but super connected. Like when I think about the divisiveness that's going on around us, politically, and even this morning, I have a small group on Facebook that is people that we were alumni of something that was a long time ago. So we're not really connected in a now kind of way. It's more like a memories type of way. But the way people are approaching COVID-19 and approaching this new reality that we are in are completely different, and so divisive. And so like there's the hall monitors and the and the shaming crowd, and then there's the ones that are like, hey, you know what, I'm not seeing, and the cowboys. It's just kind of interesting to see. And I think that community conversation piece is so important for moving forward in a way that it allows for growth and it allows for vulnerability, and that makes us stronger together. Mm-hmm. Does HUM stand for something, or is it just HUM?
No, it does. I actually didn't want it to be an acronym when I started out, but it has become one. It stands for harmony, unity, and momentum. And that's really what I want to create when I work with people and organizations.
Awesome. So what barriers, you started out before you got cancer. Mm-hmm. Did you work all the way through your treatment?
I had one project that I worked on. It was very challenging to do that. And I ended up having a few networking meetings here and there, but that's pretty much all that I did.
Okay. So what were some of the barriers that you've encountered during starting your business?
I think for me, certainly post-cancer, but during cancer as well, energy is a key barrier for me. I think mental energy and physical energy. When I first stopped treatment, like I said, I had this expectation that I would just bounce back, and I couldn't. Like a 1 hour meeting on the phone, and I would have a migraine headache. I'd have to lay down. The rest of the day would be gone. Same thing if I was doing computer work for more than a couple hours. It would just wipe me right out. And so very quickly, I had to get real about what it is I could and couldn't do. And that led me to actually getting a lot more support, I think, way earlier on in my business journey than I would have if I hadn't gone through this experience. I think I just would have pushed myself, which probably would have led to some other sort of physical or mental breakdown.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? Is I'd be intrigued to see, which we don't have that particular lens, but what our businesses would be like if we hadn't gone through what we had to go through to get where we are.
Yes.
You know, there's that whole concept of if you cut a chrysalis open, the butterfly will never learn to fly, right? There's never going to be that growth, that strength in the wings that has happened through the struggle. So
beautiful.
As much as we want to kind of do it and get her done, right? Sometimes we have to go through those parts. And I think a lot actually about these people, about businesses now during this pandemic that have, had some significant challenges, like laying off all their staff and having to shut their doors without, any income at all. And, what are they choosing to create out of this, as opposed to, are they just sitting there in panic and fear, right? This idea, when I started this interview podcast series, it was about, pivoting and thriving post-cancer. And everything, you and I have had this conversation before, is that everything that the world is going through right now with this pandemic, it's so relevant to what it was that we had to go through when we were in treatment. And that, sink or swim, and that, what am I going to learn? What am I going to create? How can I move forward through this? And the accepting of what happened and creating and becoming the master instead of the robot, being the cause and not the effect. And, because we could easily, and I've met a lot of people that have gone through this cancer journey, which is a word I'm not super big fan of. Yeah. This cancer journey, and come out of it bitter and woe is me. And why did that happen to me? And, same with people that have been through an accident. I know that growing up, there was kids that, off doing stupid shit and then, get in a car accident and they're in their chair, or, dive off a cliff, and have some permanent damage, and then feel through going through, what are they creating out of that? Like, how do they take this pile of whatever happens to you and make something beautiful out of it and bloom where you're planted, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's a strength, and it's a testament to you that you've been able to grow and out of this that's happened to you, right? I mean, you weren't in the best place before. When I got diagnosed, I was working a job that, was sucking me dry and taking every bit of energy. And, I needed a break. I needed a break from my life. Like at that time, I had just finished my master's degree while working full time. I had 2 teenage boys that were in elite hockey. I was the tournament coordinator, the registrar for the Hockey Association. I was, on a whole bunch of different boards, like board of directors at the time. I'm not surprised at all that my body was like, new direction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And did you see it as that sort of a gift or opportunity when you were diagnosed? What was your process like?
Wow. Well, I, at the beginning, I had one of those diagnoses that was really small at the beginning, and then it just kept compounding and growing and growing and growing. So I had a very small tumor. It was only like the size of your pinky nail. It was 8 millimeters or something like that. And it was almost too small for them to say, let's do chemo. But so they decided just to do a lumpectomy, and then I was going to maybe have some radiation and I'd be back to work in 6 weeks. That was the original plan. And then my oncologist, or when they did the lumpectomy, they found another piece that it was attached to that they didn't see in the mammogram. So they decided to do an MRI and found 5 more tumors. So then it was like, okay, but they're all small, they're all little, but we're going to do the chemo. So I ended up, and then it turned out that that it was what's called triple positive. So it was a special type of really destructive tumor. And I ended up having 21 rounds of chemo, 28 rounds of radiation. I ended up with a double mastectomy at the end of it, just after I was done everything. So my little 8 millimeter lump turned into a really big boulder. And it was, for me, I think, honestly, when I think back to the gift that was given to me, I needed it to be in those stages because I wasn't paying attention. And, I like to say, sometimes I've gone through life with my elbows up, and I have to learn by tripping over myself and, getting into the battles before being really prepared. And that was no different. I kind of was like, okay, yeah, no problem. I got this, right? And then it was like, oh, I don't have this. Oh, I need to learn something from this. Oh, what am I going to learn today? And I ended up, like, after I was done all of that, I ended up with 6 surgeries in total. And I ended up having a moment where I just said, I looked at my husband, and I had so much anxiety, and I was really in a rough spot emotionally. And I ended up going out to Tofino, and he's like, take however long you want. I went out and walked the beach in March. It was stormy. I was there for 6 days, where I basically just screamed at the wind. And I hashed it all out, and I was, I think back, I'm not particularly religious, but there's a story where Jacob is wrestling with God. I don't know if you are familiar, but it's way back in the Old Testament, and he's wrestling with God, and there's a message he's trying to get, and God finally just, I don't know. The story is that he breaks his hip or something like that. I'm not sure, but there's something to do with his hip. And so from that point forward, he's not able to walk without a limp. So he'll always remember the struggle. And that's totally my thing too. Like, I'm like, yeah, I needed to learn through my own reactions to my battle, what it was that I needed to learn. Like, and I would never have learned. I still to this day, I'll go in head first and have to learn it the wrong way around. If I just, asked the question or listened to something before going in, my son's exactly the same. I watch him he goes through with his elbows up too. And I always think, that's going to be my book title when I get my book out, his, elbows up, let's go.
Yeah.
And I even say when we go to Costco, like, it was, come on, I'm ready. Right?
I love it. You should get some t-shirts made.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So next question is, how do you balance your fear of recurrence with your desire to live your best life?
Or that's a good question.
Do you have fear of recurrence? I should have started with.
Less and less. I find it comes back when I'm about to go for my checkup. So I go back to see my oncologist every 3 months. Mm-hmm. And that first 3 months, that check-in, that was a real wake-up call for me in terms of, how much fear I did have about recurrence, because I wasn't really conscious of it. But I started having nightmares that I had metastatic cancer, and all these negative tests kept coming back, and it was a mess. But I had stopped booking appointments with my counselor at that point. And so I didn't really have too much support going into that first meeting. But after that meeting is when I was like, okay, this is a thing. And I wanted to be a bit more proactive about it. So I do have a regular appointment with a counselor, and I book it sort of right before my check-in. And I also found a really supportive talking circle through the Callanish organization. They have a circle once a month in Victoria. And I found that community extraordinarily supportive. I did not tap into the cancer community too much in my journey, mainly because of what we were talking about before in terms of a lot of fear-based reactions to the disease and having it. And I did not want to surround myself with that kind of energy. And so I didn't. But after the fact, I found this circle in particular to be helpful. So I can just like say all those fears out loud, and everyone's just like, yes, we get you, we understand, we've been through that, which is so comforting. And I think meditation is also huge for me, being able to, I wake up with my head full of fear every day about all sorts of things, but recurrence is one of the things that trickles in. But sitting down, realigning myself with spirit and a bigger purpose and trust really helps me move through that fear. I think the fear is so natural and normal, and I try to just see it for what it is and be like, I see you, it's okay, and then try to go from there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I haven't, I still have days where I'll feel a twinge, right? And I'll be like, oh, I'll check and be like, oh, right, but I don't actually have breast tissue.
Right.
I forget, particularly if I have issues in my armpits or whatever, or if you get a headache and then suddenly it's traveled, right? You're suddenly metastatic to your brain.
Oh yeah,
all the time.
I can relate to that. I get phantom pain in my neck, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So if you could go back in time, pick a time actually to when you would go back to, and what would be one nugget of information that you wish you had known?
This is a really good question, and I actually struggle with it a little bit because I don't really know. Like the first thing that comes to my head is I would have liked to know how difficult it was going to be after cancer, because I actually thought that was one of the most challenging parts, was like coming out of treatment and just sort of being really disoriented and not knowing what to do with myself, or I actually reckon it to like a tsunami, like you get cancer, that tsunami comes in and you're just focused on survival in that mode. And you're also worried about the survival of those around you. You're like, are you okay? Are you okay? Because that's what a lot of cancer is too. But then the tsunami goes back out and you're just like left in this rubble. And I found like I didn't recognize myself. I didn't recognize my environment. I didn't know how to be in that space post-cancer. And so that really sent me into depression when I came out, and especially dealing with all the fatigue and the mental fatigue and brain fog as well. And all that uncertainty, fear. And so I wasn't expecting that, and no one had told me that. But it was through talking in my circles that I found out that was actually a normal thing and very common. But would I have liked to know that in the beginning? I don't know. Like, I think it's sort of like, what do you want to know all the things about childbirth before you get pregnant? Probably not. Like, it's not helpful. And I don't think I would have liked to know that it was actually going to be really hard at the end post-treatment. So yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure if there's a nugget that comes to mind naturally.
I remember being told about that it would be really hard post-treatment. And I remember my arrogance thinking, that won't happen to me.
Of course. Yeah.
So I don't think I would have absorbed it anyway. And I remember, and now I'll say, it's funny. I have a couple people in treatment, and I'll answer their questions. Absolutely. Exact same treatment as mine. I will go through and give you what was my experience. That doesn't mean it's going to be your experience, but I find I hedge a little bit because I don't want to tell them the bad parts of my experience, because A, they may not have those bad parts. B, that's my experience. And C, they could have something completely different and completely worse or better, right? So there's no point in me filling their brain with fear of my experience when that's not necessarily going to be theirs. That's with regards to cancer. I think when it comes to being a business owner, yes, I'll take that information.
Yes.
Right. Yes. But I think about, I think about, and still actually, I'll still meet it with resistance. It's just my MO, right? That's the way that I seem to go through life. I'm a lot quicker now to acknowledge that that's holding me back than I would have been before. But, I think about, did you know anybody other than your dad that had lymphoma?
Well, actually my counselor had lymphoma, which was brilliant, but I met her, much later into the process.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I didn't.
Yeah. It's funny because my dad was diagnosed with brain cancer just as soon as I had decided to go back to work. And I was off for almost 3 years, so 2.5 years. And I remember my stepmom was like asking me I was suddenly the expert, right? And it was totally different. Yes, actually, to be honest, I thought I was the expert too at the time, right? Again, a learning-ish for me. Right. But he had a totally different type of cancer than I did. And I had been through radiation. Yes. And I had a friend that had brain cancer and survived and went through radiation. So I had an idea what that was going to be like for him. But, and actually now that I think about it, I don't think they decided to go for radiation, but I had an understanding of chemo for sure, because I'd been through it. But again, totally different situation, totally different type of chemo. Everybody's is different.
Yeah, I think that's so important to keep in mind, that everybody's journey is totally different. There are similarities in the experience.
Yeah.
There are threads that you can join together, and yes.
Yeah. And it's no different than now that everybody's, with this pandemic, everybody's approaching it differently. Everybody's got different situations. Everybody's, I think about our prime minister and handing out all the different levels of relief. And then there's always those, but what about me? But what about me? But what about me's? And, I think about people in different countries that don't even have that type of support or whatever. And have you read The Tale of the Mountain Lion on my website?
No.
Okay. It's an analogy about cancer, what it's like to live with cancer. And basically you open the fridge and out jumps a mountain lion. And it's like, what? And you don't even have time to really think about how there's, why is there a mountain lion in my fridge? You just have to run. And, all the different parts that go with it. But there's one part where they're talking about how, you're halfway up and you're fighting this mountain lion and you look over and somebody else has got this really wimpy mountain lion and you're like with 3 legs and 1 eye. And you're like, why couldn't I have that mountain lion? And then the other one, you go to the other side and there's like a saber-toothed mountain lion and it's like, huge and monstrous. And you're like, oh, I'm glad I don't have that. And then, but who in their right mind wants to be fighting a mountain lion anyway? So who cares about the mountain lion? Everybody's going to have their own experience. So I'll send you that link when we're done. It's a good one.
Yeah.
So back to our questions though. How about back to your business? What is the best business advice you've ever been given?
Oh, I love this question because I think this is the best advice ever. And it actually came from Sandra Yancey from our eWomen Network in that, and she said it much more eloquently, but essentially only do the things that are your gifts or that bring you joy and farm out the rest of the tasks. And that advice I heard really early on in my journey, and I took it and have implemented it since I heard it. So I think that's especially important for what I was facing in terms of lack of energy in all sorts of ways, that I was not going to get a business off the ground if I had to do all the tasks, if I had to develop my website and set up my CRM and do my bookkeeping and all the things. I would still be developing my website at this point, a year and a half later. So I, luckily had some resources to be able to just hire that out so that I could focus on the things that really brought me joy. And what I love about this piece of advice is that it allows me to actually get out there and do my work. But if you think about it, it's like, well, if I get to do my work and that brings me joy, that means that I'm putting like high vibrational energy out there into the world. And if I give those tasks that just sort of like, suck all the energy out of me, they feel miserable to do, but I give that to somebody where that's their joy, then they get excited, they get to be at a high vibrational energy and put that out there in the world. And to me, that is motivating because that's really what my business is all about. And that's another layer of hum, is that hum is a vibration. If you think of hummingbirds as well, which is my logo, they are operating at a high vibration. And that's really what I want to create out there in the world through conscious communication and conversation. And so it just aligns fully with everything that I believe in. And it has fully supported me in having a successful business.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that advice. I heard that advice actually. And I think it was when I started with the eWomen as well. And it's amazing how you free up the space, one of the things that I'm doing that you're aware of, I know you've been a few times, is I have these Zoom meetings in the morning to help people with whatever's coming up for them, whether they're looking for community or if they're looking for accountability or guidance or some coaching, or they're just feeling stuck, or if they just want to have a reason to get up in the morning. And, recurring themes seem to be, I got to work on my website, or I got to do this one, Instagram post or whatever it might be. And it's like, if this is dragging you down every day, if this is that heavy, if that's what you want to bring to this table every day, what would it look like and what would it open up for you if you were to let that go and let someone else do it? Because I know when I start doing things that are not in my genius zone and I feel frustrated, and then I get mad that I'm not an SEO expert. Well,
yeah, those people are out there. Like, give them.
They are.
Yeah.
And just the same as, I have somebody that comes and cleans my house.
Yes.
Yes. They love it. They love to do that for a living. That's what they do. They do a great job at it. Who am I to take that joy away?
Exactly. And I don't know, I don't want to genderize it, but I do hear this a lot with women in particular. It's like we have somehow bought into or drank the Kool-Aid that we have to do everything. And we carry that over into our business models as well. And I think it's just so unhealthy. And I think making these small shifts in your life, like learning to let go, changes everything. It changes your relationships. It changes your health and well-being, because then you can start to prioritize self-care in your business model as well. All these things that are so important and that we tend to let go of and prioritize doing all the things over that. So, yeah.
Yes, totally. Okay, so if you were to look at somebody or speak to somebody who is currently either in treatment or has come out of treatment and is looking to pivot in their business or their career, what is a piece of advice you would give them?
I would tell them to trust their intuition and take action. So sort of two pieces of advice, but they go together. The intuition part, I think, is so important. And it's something that I really got a lot of practice honing in on in the cancer journey, because it told me everything that I needed to know in terms of what foods should I eat. It wasn't about, I need to follow this diet or that diet because that's better for cancer. It was like, what does it feel like if I think about eating a banana? Not so good. Okay, I'm not going to eat bananas, and the intuition will guide you in terms of what is the work that really you're meant to be doing, and who you're meant to be working with, and who you're meant to be surrounding yourself with. So if you think about meeting a potential client, you're having one of those exploratory conversations, and all of a sudden, like, your energy feels low, and maybe you're just a bit confused, or you have that knot in your stomach and it doesn't feel good. It's probably not the person you're meant to be working with. But you think about that person that you encounter, and all of a sudden you're full of energy, you feel expansive, and maybe you're like full of shivers. It's like, oh yeah, that's the direction you need to go. So I think really finding some practice to tune into your intuition, but then making sure there's that action piece on top of it, because I think sometimes we do get motivated and excited, and but then we fail to take action, and then the energy sort of trickles away, and we sort of have to build it up or find it somewhere else. So I don't know, you could probably talk more about the action piece and why that's so important, if you think it's important. I don't know. But to me, I just think, for me, action is just what keeps my energy high if I'm doing the same things. And when I get stuck and I've stopped, I can just get overcome by fear, and then, nothing is moving forward.
Yeah. Well, I think about, do you know who Mel Robbins? Do you know Mel Robbins? Okay. So in her book, Work It Out, the very first person that she coaches through that, he has this dream to have a wine shop. He wants to be a wine guy, but he's a PE teacher right now. And he's like, who am I to think that I can do this? And she tells a story about when she left being a lawyer. All she wanted was to own a coffee shop. She was like, I love coffee shops. I love being the whole, the smell of them, the community, all the thing. That was her total jam. That was what she thought was going to be her next thing. Well, the very first thing she did was got a job, part-time job at a coffee shop. And 2 weeks in, she's like, I do not want to do this at all. And, if she had spent the entire time of, building this thing and building this whole plan, maybe even buying a place, leasing a place, or hiring staff, learning about coffee, whatever, and then finding out that she's going to have to be taking out the garbages 4 days a week, that somebody's poured their hot coffee in and it's dripping all over, and, whatever it is, it's just taking that one step and checking where the energy is. Taking that one step and going, okay, so this is that one step that's going to get me closer to what it is that I want. It may end up helping you to see if that's really what you do want, or what you don't want. And I know one other piece that I came up while you were saying that, with the intuition piece. When I was in treatment, that I felt like it was a personal affront to me and my confidence. And I had this, I felt like everything, my whole foundation had been shaken, in that post-cancer trauma. I feel like the cancer itself, the treatment and all that stuff that we have to go through is one piece, but that, okay, you're good. We'll see you in 6 months or 3 months or whatever it is. And you have no more appointments, no more treatments, nobody else to lean on, whatever it is. And suddenly you're stuck there going, I don't even know who I am anymore. Right? I'm a whole new person, and I feel like I'm, pretty broken, and, having that intuition piece, it's still there. It's still there. You still have those still small voice inside you that knows what it is that you love, that you want, that you can't. And it may just be buried right now under this rubble, from the tsunami. It's buried and it's scattered, but piece by piece and one Lego block after the other, you can build that up again. And, following the energy, does this energize or deplete me? What is it that, which is the way that's going to make me happier is not the word, but which one is the one that makes me feel like I'm moving towards the version of me that I want to be, right? Because we're all just rotating iterations of who we are, right?
Yes.
So,
absolutely.
Okay. So anything further that you wanted to talk about before we wrap up?
I think, something that came to me when you just spoke is self-compassion. And I feel like that's something I'm continuously trying to cultivate, but that was so helpful, and it continues to be helpful in my recovery journey and in the growth of my business. In that wherever I am, it's okay. There's a downside. Just one thing I did coming out of the journey was just surround myself with amazing people who are living their heart's work. eWomen Network is all about that for me. But it's easy for me to get caught in a trap of comparison. We talked about this morning. And I think self-compassion sort of squashes the whole comparison game and just gives me permission to be wherever I am in any given moment and have that be absolutely okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And for us, those of us that are strivers, that are go get 'ems, sometimes that self-compassion is the first piece to go.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Okay, so how can we find out more about you and Hum Consulting?
Well, I have my website is humconsulting.ca. And on there, you can find out more about the company. I also have a blog, and some of the blogs relate to my cancer journey. And where else? I also have a monthly newsletter. So if you go to my website, a pop-up will show up and you can sign up and get this free dialogue guide that I created. And then you'll also be added to the newsletter. And the newsletter is really all about motivating you to step into your leadership roles and support meaningful conversation while you go about doing that. So that's a good place to find me. I'm also on Instagram, and there you'll find out more about my personal life and my love for cooking. There's lots of food photos up there because food and conversation and connection go hand in hand. And that's under my full name, Ame-Lia Tamburrini, with no hyphen.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's been an honor. I appreciate you so much. So.
Thank you so much, Terry. This is such a great thing that you're doing. And I look forward to hearing your other interviews.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks.